Thank you so much for being a part of this very exciting program. I'm Carole Copeland Thomas. We're going to begin in just a second. Again, welcome so much. We're so glad that you are with us today. I am Carole Copeland Thomas, your Zoom director, program facilitator. You're in store for a treat, for a wonderful program honoring Black History Month with a collaboration of respected organizations on the island of Martha's Vineyard. Wherever you happen to be, I'd love for you in the chat room, let us know where you're located, because we know we have people who are not on Martha's Vineyard, who may have been in far off places or elsewhere, but you are going to be in treat for a wonderful, wonderful program. I would like to bring up first Arthur Doubleday. He is the president of the Martha's Vineyard branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, otherwise known as the NAACP. Arthur, come on, take yourself off mute, and please join us. I'm going to remove my spotlight and put you on board. Please, you can open up your camera and begin your presentation. Arthur Doubleday.
Good morning. How is everybody? Can't hear anyone, so I wouldn't know. Thank you, Carole, Ms. Copeland, for inviting me to speak and open up this event. I greatly appreciate it. As president of the Martha's Vineyard branch of the NAACP, on behalf of all our members, I'd like to thank a number of the organizations that partnered with us today. The League of Women Voters, ASALH, the MB Museum, and the best, boldest, greatest library ever, the Oak Bluffs Library, my hometown library, which I love dearly. I want to take a minute to recognize the life of Robert Carter Hayden Jr., who we unfortunately lost in January. Mr. Hayden was a larger than life individual who I say this, I don't say this lightly. I don't think there's a Black leader in Boston who Mr. Hayden didn't have some sort of touch point with at some point in their career. He was behind the founding and the start of METCO. METCO, for those that don't know, is an agency that takes students of color from the urban areas of Boston and gives them an education in the more affluent suburbs. There's a number of leaders that have gone through that program. Tito Jackson went to Brookline High because of that program. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. The number of people that lead our region because they got a good start thanks to METCO. He then eventually pivoted on to Boston Public Schools, which I find fascinating because as much as I am thankful that my dad was able to get an education at Lexington High School, I do think that children should be able to get an education where they live. And to see him pivot on to Boston Public Schools later in his career is him attacking the root cause of the issue, which is children should be able to get a good quality education steps from where they live. He was the founding member of the Martha's Vineyard branch of ASALH, and he was the secretary for the national organization. He was a writer for the Bay State Banner. He taught, I mean, this slide could go on forever. He taught at Northeastern University, Boston College, MIT, UMass Boston, Lesley University. And then finally, when he came to the Vineyard and he was beginning to live down there full time, he volunteered with the Oak Bluffs Historic Commission. He was an author. He wrote, or he contributed to the publications of the Dictionary of the American Negro Biography, Encyclopedia of the African American Culture and History, and the American National Biography. So if we could just take a moment to recognize the contribution of Robert Carter Hayden Jr. He will be missed. He was, like I said, he was a larger than life figure. In recognition of his contributions and the fact that it's Black History Month, the Youth Council Planning Committee met this past week and decided to launch a Black History Creative Writing Contest. We are going to be doing that this year in honor of Mr. Hayden Jr. The first prize, $100, second prize, $75, third prize, $50. And this is open to any island youth. And it can be a poem, a short story, an essay. I, as a history buff, would love to read essays about local contributors to civil rights, but the essay contest is, what does Black history mean to you? And youth should be as creative as they possibly can be. And submissions need to be submitted to the mbyouthcouncil@gmail.com email address and must be done by the end of the month, February 28th, 2022. And then finally, I know I'm long-winded. I tried to start a timer and I got lost, so I'm sure I'm over my time. But finally, get in touch, get involved. Our email address is naacp@gmail.com, or you can call us 508-338-4033. Any events, any committee meetings, anything that's happening with the NAACP can be found at our website, NAACP Martha's Vineyard, Martha's Vineyard, NAACP.org. And one event that I'd like to highlight for those of you that want to continue on in the legacy of advocacy of Mr. Hayden is we will be meeting with the superintendent of Martha's Vineyard Public Schools and the principal of the Martha's Regional High School. They're going to be giving us an update on an investigation that has been completed by the Department of Education that arise out of civil rights violations. They're going to be telling us what they've done in response to that investigation and what they're going to be doing ongoing. That will be February 16th, 2022 at 6 p.m. You can go to our website and register, or you can go to this bit.ly link at the bottom. I will also put that in the chat. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Arthur Doubleday, thank you very, very much for that great presentation. I remember Bob Hayden personally, have, I think, one of his books. He was an extraordinary person and left his legacy, big shoes to fill. And thank you very much for that very fitting tribute that you gave on his behalf regarding, certainly on behalf of the NAACP Martha's Vineyard branch. We thank you so much. All right. We have a wonderful program in store for you. And let me just, there we are. Wonderful program in store for you. We also will have a formal Q&A session at the end of our program. All of the organizations will be making presentations live and via video. So if you have a question, we ask that you put your question in the Q&A panel. You should see Q&A. You can go on and open it up and put your question right there. We have Marie Doubleday, who is going to be monitoring that throughout the length of our program today, and we will answer all the questions at the end. So I know that there's some of you who are eager and have questions, but we want to save them until the end of the program. Comments, please keep those comments coming. I see where you are coming from, where you're living, and I'm really excited that you are here, and thank you so very, very much. Now, back to my slide deck. Let me go on and pull that up right now. And we're now going to hear from Michael Curry. This is a video presentation that was originally delivered in October 8th to be exact, 2021, for a collaborative organization I created called the US-UK Summit on Race. We celebrated Black History Month in October in the United Kingdom. That's when they celebrate Black History Month. And Michael Curry was one of our speakers and delivered an extraordinary and compelling message about the impact of being a person of color in the Black and brown communities and how that impact results in health issues, socioeconomic issues, prison issues, etc. This is about 5 minutes long. We'd love for you just to take it all in and understand the importance of what he is saying. So without further ado, we bring you Michael Curry. He is a national board member of the NAACP, former branch president of Boston, the Boston branch, and a longtime activist, also the president of one of the largest healthcare organizations in Massachusetts. So without further ado, Michael Curry.
You know, the way I got led into this healthcare space was because I grew up in an inner city in Boston, and this is what translates to many of you in the UK. And growing up in a housing development, we call it. So we have those all over the globe, right? These projects, we call them. And I remember, Garth, walking around my neighborhood, and I noticed that a lot of people who looked like me were poor. I noticed that a lot of people who looked like me were incarcerated. All my uncles were locked up. I walked around my neighborhood growing up, and I saw that a lot of people looked like me. The auntie and uncle now were dying of diabetes and heart disease and cancer at a high rate, living shorter lifespans, not able to build wealth. We were on welfare or public assistance. A lot of people who looked like me were being followed around stores or stopped by the police or murdered. And then I visited family in Birmingham, Alabama, and Cleveland, Ohio, and other parts of the country. And I saw Black folks like me living the same way. And Chase, I can't help but to say, when I saw that as a kid, I said, what's wrong with us? You can't help but to internalize that. Say, what's wrong with us that I can go to UK right now and go to a neighborhood and see Black folks living just like they in Roxbury, Massachusetts? Something must be wrong with us. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I left my neighborhood, went to college, and I met a Black history professor on a campus in Minneapolis, St. Paul, who helped me connect the dots. So if you want to talk about economic inequality, let's talk about slavery. Let's talk about 40 acres and a mule, which we never received, or the repositioning of millions of former slaves. The promise broken. Let's talk about redlining and restrictive covenants. Let's talk about the GI Bill that repositioned many Black Americans, white Americans, but did not reposition many Black veterans because they were dishonorably discharged. The promise was broken. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about all the stimulus bills and recovery bills that went into white businesses that did not go into Black business. So Chase, I always think about this. Something is wrong with us. No, something is wrong with systems that produce these inequalities. Mm-hmm. That's the work of the NAACP. I am fortunate to be on a national board, whether it's housing, education, healthcare, environmental, climate justice. We have to realize that this is an all-in battle. That quite frankly, if you're sitting on this call right now in the UK, you're in any parts of Africa, or you're anywhere in the States, and you're not engaged in this struggle, from a healthcare perspective, Garth, I would say this. If George Floyd moved you, when you saw that knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, if that moved you to do something,
yes, sir.
From a healthcare perspective, there are more people dying unnecessarily because of disparate treatment and bad healthcare and lack of access. They don't have insurance. They show up at the emergency room, and by the time they find out they got cancer, they got stage 4 because they don't have health insurance. You would have been marching in the streets years ago if you understood that more people are dying of healthcare inequality than they are from knees on the neck. That's more people. So while we should be outraged at the George Floyds, the Tamir Rice, and I can go back in the crates to Emmett Till, we really need to be charged up, because we've, as I said earlier, Chase, we've gotten weathered in the UK and in the States from disparate treatment, from high rates of morbidity, mortality, from high incarceration, from abuse and neglect and misrepresentation and our bad images in the media, and we are all weathered to it. So there's a challenge, Carole, that I think, and I appreciate the time to be on this call today. Carole, I posted on my Facebook page, I said, I'm glad so many people are woke and other people are waking up, but I'm an insomniac.
Yes, Michael, that is absolutely amazing.
Lots to think about. Michael Curry, a good friend, a champion of community rights, and bringing up the topic of healthcare disparities, which I'm sure Dr. Lorna Andrade knows firsthand, significantly impacting all of our communities. And something, since we're talking about health and wellness today, that's our theme, certainly gives us lots of food for thought. Thank you very much, Michael Curry, for this rebroadcast of very, very significant words. I'm now going to enthusiastically bring up the co-chairs of this wonderful collaborative this morning, the Martha's Vineyard Annual Collaborative Black History Month event. And the co-chairs are Dr. Lorna Chambers Andrade and Marie Araujo. So please take yourselves off mute and open up your cameras, and we will bring both of you on board. Thank you all so very much. Let me stop my screen 1 second. Do that. And ladies, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We welcome you to our 5th annual Black History Educational Collaborative, and we're so happy that each one of you could be with us, both Marie and I. And Marie's last name's Portuguese, pronounced as Araujo.
Araujo, thank you.
Okay, so based on my brother there, Michael Curry, bringing you up to date on the disparities, I want to give you a quick historical review. First of all, race in healthcare is complicated. Why? It's a pseudoscience. What does that mean? It means when African Americans are seen as not human. I repeat that. It's a pseudoscience. When African Americans are seen as not human. Well, experiments took place involuntarily, sterilizations in 1905, all the way through to 1922, probably even more so. But in 1960, Black women activists pushed back on these situations. And in 2003, unequal treatments on race, cultural differences, and outcomes in our healthcare were noted as disparities. Remember that. 2016, 1/2 of our medical students still believed in the pseudoscience. Remember what I told you about pseudoscience. Now, let me give you an example, or a few examples. Healthcare professionals trained and taken an oath had influence diagnosis. Remember this, had influence diagnosis. Let me give you an example. With nonverbal communication, they gave lower scores, had less touching, hands-on with the patients, and was observed standing further away from patients. This is a negative interaction, folks. Note, even some of our Black trained MDs did the same things. Race, gender, and cultural differentiated history of obstetrics and gynecology built in on abusive use of Black women. The laws, policies, and implicit biases were in action. When policies were forbidden, the practices continued anyway. Remember this: implicit bias is unconscious belief out of our awareness versus explicit is unconscious behavior and an intentional behavior. When does implicit bias show up? I want you all to remember this. It shows up in infancy. The research has proven this. Now, how to reduce the implicit biases? We must understand situations. We must educate. We must have self-awareness. We must pause and reflect. Building structure and objective and discrete system protocols. Provide respectful feedback to our colleagues and create reminders in the environment to prompt recalls of any of our trainings. Now we come to attest to the present. Note this: we are in a battle of our lives, an America with inequalities and economics, food leading to nutritional disparities, causing death, health, housing, redlining existing in some areas, jobs, poor water quality, climate, environment, education, voting rights, and many, many more. What can we do? Spiritually, we must wage a spiritual war against these evils. We get through them as a people of God. Where there is grief, there will be hope, knowing peace you dream of. Is this the everlasting love of our God? We go further. We look at the Black family with mental health and wellness issues. These are actual disparities. The impact on the Black family is catastrophic. We have less access to screenings, assessments, and implementations of any mental health therapies. If accepted by most Blacks, they don't trust the mental health providers. Why? Due to the past historical events, the deception, and the ongoing disparities with care that we see today. So I list to you these: access, resources are scarce. Assessments are not given equally. And without equality that actually fits for you, plans are doubtful. Implementations of therapies are not done. And follow-up care really take place. Now, my colleague, RN Maria Araujo, is going to share with you some helpful hints to get through some of these inequalities. Marie, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about wellness and things we can do to help ourselves get wellness. Some are simple and some very difficult, especially in this time. Good hygiene. Best way to maintain good hygiene is to make a routine and stick to it. This includes brushing and flossing teeth, washing your hands often, especially now, and sleep. Sleep is extremely important. If you don't get sleep, you're not going to be able to perform and not have your best wellness. Clean air and water, well, that of course we know in this age of climate change is not easily attainable. There are some medical schools that are now offering classes in environmental and climate change and how it impacts people of color living in disadvantaged areas. So that's a good point, a good start. Eat good plant-based food. These include fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and meat substitutes, such as soy products. Housing, well, affordable and stable housing. That, of course, we know is an issue, certainly here in Martha's Vineyard and a lot of other places. People are at least beginning to acknowledge that that's a problem. So that's a beginning, but it's a long way to go. Prayer, meditation. You can go on podcasts for free to learn how to meditate. And that will help center yourself, help calm yourself, and relieve some of the stress. Exercise, very important in your wellness, to obtain wellness. You can do things such as yoga, which strengthens your core, cycling, join a gym, but if you can't afford to join a gym, you can simply go out and walk. Walking is one of the best things to do. And lastly, hobbies. Everybody needs a hobby, needs something that they can just enjoy doing that will help them relieve their stress from everyday life. This could be singing in a choir, gardening, where you can grow your own plant-based foods, reading, writing poetry, knitting, sewing, anything that makes you happy, makes you able to just relieve the stress that we all feel on a daily basis. There are many more things that we can't list them all, but those are just basic things that you can do to help your wellness.
And on to you, back to you, Carole.
You know, this is so compelling. And I know I said at the beginning that we were going to hold the questions to the end. I know that you have to leave a little early. Two things I want to ask. Number one,
Sure.
I'll ask Marie first. And please, everyone, put your questions in the chat. Marie, is there any way that you can type up that list of solutions and either get it to me and Allyson, because we're recording this. We probably would like to keep those suggestions with the recording so people can download it, because they were great, especially meditations, going to podcasts. That's a great idea. And exercising and hobbies. Those are all very important just to help us to maintain our level of stress and keep it as low as possible. So if you could provide a list that we can then download, that would be awesome.
Sure.
And also, Dr. Lorna, the thing that really got to me that you said was even in the training and how physical space and training impacts people of color. Can you talk more about that? I mean, that just hit me between the eyes.
Well, it's just passed on. It's learned behavior. You are around colleagues that are all predominantly Caucasian, maybe a few Asians mixed in, and your professors are hammering the same negative education to everybody. So now you, as a medical student or an intern, now goes to do an assessment with a patient. You are going to do the directives that professor has given to you, no matter what color you are, because you don't want to fail your course. But now in the medical schools and all, this has changed, thank God. But I wanted people to know why sometimes you would hear a patient say, you talk about white doctors, but I don't even want a Black doctor because they're not listening to me as well. So I want people to know it happens in both realms, but we are at the present making changes with this.
I want to just go a little bit deeper with this as we move on to our next speaker. But I know someone very skilled healthcare and scientist. She has a doctorate.
Yes.
Her doctorate is in one of the science fields. She has now moved over into healthcare in working in her field in New Hampshire. She was rebuffed and rejected by patients because she's Asian. There were
Yeah.
patients who did not want her interacting with them because she happened to be an Asian American. So this is extremely significant with what
Absolutely.
both of you are talking about. So again, this could be a whole workshop in and of itself, but I wanted to bring that up just because of your time parameters.
Yes.
Thank you very
Oh, yeah.
much. Again, more questions, please put them in the chat room. We want to thank Marie Araujo. Did I pronounce that correctly this time? Yes. And Dr. Lorna Andrade. Thank you for your knowledge and your leadership. We really appreciate it. Up next is now the president of ASALH telling us more about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, his significance, and the reason why we have Black History Month today, an organization that started in 1915, Negro History Week starting in 1926, finally evolving to Black History Month in the 1970s. Without further ado, Dr. Thelma Hart Johnson. Please put your camera on, and please join me as we talk about ASALH, the Martha's Vineyard branch.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. And I start out by having a very sad note to acknowledge the passing of two of our Martha's Vineyard branch members. First, Manfield Neal Jr. Esquire passed December 20th, 21. He was the secretary and historian for the Martha's Vineyard branch. It has already been acknowledged that Robert Carter Hayden Jr. passed January 23rd, 2022. Bob served as the national secretary for ASALH, and he was the charter president of the Martha's Vineyard branch. He served also on the Oak Bluffs Historical Commission, and he guided African American tours on the island when he was in his better health. He was also the historian for our branch after he became our president emeritus. And he served on our executive committee until his death. Private services will be held for Bob on February 7th, 2022 at 12 p.m. at the Davis Funeral Home in Roxbury, Massachusetts. The services will be live streamed, and if you go online to Davis Funeral Home, you will find the link to which you may watch the live stream service February 7th, 2022 at 12 noon. We will miss Bob and Manny. Now, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, would have been 147 years old had he been living today. But in 1915, 107 years ago, he, along with others, founded the Association for the Study of African American Negro Life and History, which was changed in 1972 to the Association for the Study of African American Life and History that we call ASALH. We invite you to visit asalh.org and attend sessions during this 2022 year for the Black History Month Festival. Since we are not doing any face-to-face meetings, you will be happy to see those particular programs. Dr. Woodson was a pioneer of multiculturalism, and truly, we believe he is pleased that we are working cooperatively as ASALH, the NAACP, the League of Women Voters, Martha's Vineyard Museum, and Oak Bluffs Library, Public Library are working to spread his message of the need to keep the collective contributions of African Americans to the culture of this country. We have a video that we're going to share that is called Dr. Carter G. Woodson and the Pursuit of Truth. It was produced by Lucas Mooney. But in this video, we will hear the voice of Dr. Woodson as he talks about what he believes needs to happen to keep the collective voices of the fantastic contributions of African Americans to the society of the United States.
Today, as a rule, we take notice only of the undesirable Negroes and ignore those who are struggling to climb upward. The Association for the Study of Negro Life and History finds by scientific investigation that the record of the Negro is not to be despised.
Oh, freedom.
By creating an arsenal of scholarship to combat the lie that African Americans had no history, Carter Godwin Woodson, known as the father of Black History Month, would begin to break the barriers of prejudice that would enlighten generations to come. Woodson was born in 1875 in New Canton, Virginia, the fifth of James and Anna Liza Woodson's 9 children. As the son of former slaves, Woodson grew up extremely poor, working on his family's farm and attending school only a few months out of the year. In 1892, Woodson joined the large migration of African Americans to West Virginia to work in the coal mines. There he met Oliver Jones, an intellectually curious Civil War veteran who operated a tea room for black miners. Since Woodson was literate, Jones urged him to read a wide variety of publications allowed in the shop in exchange for food. Having engaged in discussions about the history of the race, Woodson claimed it was one of the most enlightening experiences of his life. In 1895, Woodson enrolled in Douglas High School in Huntington, West Virginia, completing his studies within a year. Woodson would go on to earn a doctorate from Harvard in 1912, in addition to his degrees from Berea College and the University of Chicago. He remains the first and only person born to former slaves to obtain a PhD in the field of history. Woodson traveled to Africa, Asia, and Europe, teaching in the Philippines and studying at the Sorbonne. Having been taught throughout his schooling that African Americans had no history, Woodson would devote his life to challenging the narrative. His exhaustive research would lay the foundation for African American studies to this day.
His writings are meticulous. He believed in scientific research at a time when many historians were not using it. Much of the fault we find in distorting Black history came from professors who taught history. They had an agenda, and often it was entirely wrong.
Woodson published almost 20 books over his lifetime, covering a broad range of topics in African American history. But he knew that to legitimize the contributions of African Americans, he would need to reach beyond the scholars. In September 1915, at the Wabash YMCA in Chicago, Woodson created the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. Now known as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or ASALH, the organization would become an outlet to educate the world about Black history.
This society publishes magazines, researches in Negro history, directs studies in clubs and schools, promotes the home study of the Negro by mail, produces texts on the Negro for schools and colleges, collects and preserves the valuable documents of Negro history, supplies libraries with special collections of rare books on the Negro, and educates promising and enterprising young men for service in historical research.
Woodson also established the Journal of Negro History, a scholarly journal where Black and white intellectuals could publish their studies. The journal also provided a medium to publish little-known primary documents on African American history. It must be noted that Woodson sought to launch a movement to legitimize African American history during an era of overt racism and mob violence. Yet Woodson believed that education was the catalyst needed to bring about social change and destroy the racist beliefs.
So what Dr. Woodson did was he was debunking the lies about us. So they were literally proving our humanity when he was building up these resources and documenting the truth about our history, and he was talking to real people who had done the work.
There's only one history, and all ethnic groups, all races should have chapters within that history. Few people thought like that before Woodson. He wasn't seeking any kind of superiority. He just wanted people to be equal. And once you know about each other, you're not holding their differences against them. You are respecting them more. To me, that's groundbreaking.
Woodson briefly returned to academia in 1919, serving as a dean at both Howard University and West Virginia Collegiate Institute. However, Woodson, who was deemed radical for insisting on textbook revisions to incorporate African American history, often clashed with administrators and other scholars. By 1922, he would return from West Virginia to Washington, D.C., and devote himself full-time to conducting research and publishing prolifically. That same year, Woodson purchased a home that would serve as his residence and headquarters of the association for the rest of his life. Here he would create his own publishing house, Associated Publishers, to print material on African American history ignored by others and generate an income for himself. The climate of the 1920s brought new interest in Black history. Movements in that decade, such as the Harlem Renaissance, created a heightened sense of racial consciousness among African Americans. Woodson was educating people of their heritage, one of which they could be proud. His home office became a community focal point in the Shaw neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Black intellectuals, activists, writers, and artists flocked to his home in support of the movement. There, Woodson also trained a new generation of scholars. While his protégés had immense respect for his passion and selfless dedication to the cause, Woodson's exacting personality often made him difficult to work with. He expected others to work as hard as he did, and would clash with those who did not share his vision.
And Woodson, he could be very blunt. He could be very direct and and very opinionated in many ways. And so African American and white audiences alike didn't always appreciate that, but that was Woodson.
And he was a perfectionist. Everything that went out of that office had to be perfect. And once we were typing, and we had typed about 300 letters, and he found out that one word was hyphenated wrong. We had to do those 300 letters all over.
By the 1930s, Woodson would become more publicly outspoken. In 1933, he published his seminal work, The Miseducation of the Negro, a scathing critique of systemic racism in education and of blacks who would not challenge it. The book would become a manifesto for generations of African American activists advocating radical social change. Woodson expanded his public presence by giving speeches and writing articles and columns in newspapers. He engaged teachers, clergymen, fraternal groups, and black civic leaders to reach the masses. Committed to teaching people at all levels of education, he created the Negro History Bulletin in 1937. The bulletin told the stories of the near great and was aimed primarily for the general black community. For Woodson, history belonged to everyone, and it was too important to be left to the scholars. He would create Negro History Week to ensure that the rich history of African Americans would be taught worldwide. The week-long celebration during the second week in February, in honor of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln, would later evolve to Black History Month. It remains today as one of Woodson's most lasting legacies.
In our own country, we find that the Negro, in spite of his enslavement, achieved likewise. Negroes felled the trees, drained the swamps, cultivated the soil, produced the staples upon which the wealth of our Southland has been based. We shall overcome.
Woodson died in 1950 on the eve of the Civil Rights Movement. His pioneering efforts to preserve and publicize the historical heritage of Black Americans would prove essential in the struggle for equality. By institutionalizing the study of African American history, Carter G. Woodson would begin to break down the barriers of racial prejudice and hate and transform minds to this day.
He gave us a truer understanding of the United States by showing us that African Americans contributed mightily to this nation. But all this has happened because he brought truth to light.
Let
We are all here today sharing our time to learn more about African American history. We must realize that in our country, we have great differences existing right now that threaten the very fiber of the republic of our democracy. Dr. Woodson was a stalwart multiculturalist, and children even get the idea of what it is when one is seeking truth for the betterment of a society. I found a work by an 8-year-old in Washington, D.C., and the 8-year-old person said this: Dr. Woodson, all of his days, improved his mind, improved his ways. He wrote history for his school and never broke the golden rule. He wrote history for our race and never made himself a disgrace. Dr. Woodson was a kind man. His death left heavy hearts. I don't think that anyone else could step in and take his part. I am told through research and findings that Dr. Woodson was married to his pursuit of truth about African American history. So I don't think anyone really has stepped into his part, but we are marching onward and upward to be a collaborative society that respects the golden rule to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And as the good book says, to love everyone as you love yourself.
That was powerful. I don't know what else to add. The only thing I think about is when we think about Carter G. Woodson and his vision, his preciseness, typing 300 pieces of documentation over again because a hyphen was misplaced. That level of precision is just extraordinary. I thank you so much, Dr. Thelma Hart Johnson, for sharing that very, very visionary video with us. And I always love that version of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Very fitting to have both of them hand in hand. Thank you very, very much for that. We appreciate you and appreciate all that you bring to the table too. Appreciate you. We're going to take a 5-minute break. You'll have a chance to stretch. Please keep the comments going in the chat room. And also, please keep the questions coming. We're going to save all the questions for the end of the program. So you're on break now for 5 minutes, and we will return shortly. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed your break. Got a cup of coffee, water, just stretched a little bit. Now we're going to fire ahead, move ahead with some amazing presentations to continue our program with the Martha's Vineyard annual collaborative Black History Month event. Bringing up our next message from the League of Women Voters is Kristi Strahler. Kristi, take it away.
Marie's going to introduce her.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Kristi Strahler is a retired nurse. Her nursing career started in the second grade when she helped Miss Killoran daily in the elementary school nursing office. She went on to become a candy striper at 15, working in a hospital on Long Island, New York. She knew without hesitation that nursing was to be her future career. After high school, she attended the Johns Hopkins Hospital School of Nursing in Baltimore, Maryland, and graduated in 1967. She worked for the following 30 years as an operating room nurse. As her husband's career blossomed and academic opportunities and grants came his way. Her operating room experience allowed her to find a job in every location where they lived. When finally settled in Boston, she then became a geriatric nurse, caring for Alan's parents and a beloved aunt for 10 years. She volunteered at Planned Parenthood during that time. That chapter is behind her now, and she and Alan live full-time on the Vineyard. She devotes her time and energy to work with the League of Women Voters and the NAACP here on Martha's Vineyard, and lovingly supports Alan in his endeavors here, and awaits visits from family and friends whenever this COVID nightmare is over. Kristi?
Thank you very much, Kristi. Just turn your camera on and we're ready for you.
It is. My camera is on.
Awesome. All right.
Hi, everyone. May I start?
Yes, you may. You're ready.
Excuse me, I didn't understand. Okay. I was so moved by what has been come before. I would like to have just a couple personal comments from my heart has been, it's beating faster. That's what I should say. And number one, I wanted to comment something Lorna said. As a nurse, when I was working at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, I also stayed there and worked for a couple of years while Alan was there finishing graduate work. And the one thing that I found is that nurses did come close to all patients and did touch. So however others handled their patients, that is not what I found we did as nurses. Number one. Number two, I would like to mention something about the NAACP. When we're trying to be activists, we have to find a place to put our action. And I would like to mention that there is now ongoing a legislative action committee run by Rush Ashton that is now on the website. If you would like to join us next Monday, it's an every monthly program of action, and I'm a member of that committee. Thirdly, I was also moved, and I wanted to mention about the African American Heritage Trail here on the island. There are 31 plaques of African American stories, and I would like to pay tribute to Elaine Miller and Carrie Tankard, who is also a member of our League of Women Voters. And I purchased a book, which I'm now going to just put up on the screen, Born on the Water. And I'd like to read something. When a student receives a family tree assignment in school and can only trace back 3 generations, Grandma gathers the family and the student ancestors and learns that 400 years ago, in 1619, their ancestors were stolen and brought to America by European enslavers. But before that, they had a home, they had a land, they had a language. She learns how the people said to be born on the water survived, how they planned dreams and planted them with hope, how they learned new words for love, for friend, for family, for joy, for growth, and for home. Then they were enslaved. And this story, I really hope you all look into and understand and share, which we have done with our grandchildren, about history. Thank you. Now I will give the presentation that I was asked to do. Thank you, Marie. It is a privilege to represent our Martha's Vineyard League this morning. The League of Women Voters was founded by Carrie Chapman Catt in 1920 as successor to the National Women's Suffrage Association. It is today a national, state, and local organization. We have just celebrated our 100th anniversary in 2020, which you may have participated in activities last year. Bummer, COVID. I would like to read to you the League purpose. The League of Women Voters of the United States is a nonpartisan political organization that promotes informed citizen participation in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League shall not support or oppose any political party or any candidate for elective or appointed office. If this is the purpose, then you may ask, what is the work that meets this objective? We have a diverse membership in our league here on Martha's Vineyard who are very dedicated to this effort. 5 of the members are on this program now with you. Briefly, our committees doing the work consist of the following, and I am not naming them all because they change all the time. We celebrate Black History Month every February, proudly joining in the collaborative, and that is the program that you are sharing and learning from today. We have community engagement, which varies all the time depending on what's happening in our community. Civics engagement is happening now at the Martha's Vineyard Regional High School, and we have a member, Kenneth, is going to be helping with that all the time. We have climate updates, which is part of my committee, supporting the Martha's Vineyard Commission Climate Action Plan. Legislative action, just as with the NAACP, monthly updates to reach elected officials on league initiatives, which include the ones that we are mentioning today, which are imperative. There has to be voting for change. Voter services, which I just commented on. Candidate forums in the spring, as you may know, are presented in every town where there are contested races for offices in town government. Voters learn of candidate positions, which promotes informed voting decisions. So you can keep aware and ask questions of our elected officials to help make changes. Civic engagement. We educate citizens about the process of running for office in local positions and what positions are vacant in each town. This initiative has just been started this year, and we're thrilled you will be seeing some advertising about it in papers and with your town columnists, and that's ongoing. The goal, of course, is to encourage more people to run for local office. So take a look at that. Maybe you would like to join one of those opportunities, even as a volunteer, and then all of a sudden say, hey, I want to be elected. Finally, on these committees that I'm sharing is the Affordable Housing Initiative, which with our league has been since 1996. Yet today, in 2022, is the unbelievable recognition that this issue has not been solved. and that there is still an urgent need for year-round affordable housing here on the Vineyard. And when we think about health, what stress and what incredible mental health, almost horror is it for Black, brown families, and as well Indigenous families, white families, whatever, family is the key word, that have to do the Martha's Vineyard shuffle and go from place to place. And we personally have friends that have to leave in May because they won't have a home. And I've seen on our block a wonderful family of children jumping on a little trampoline and singing, and all of a sudden they were gone from our neighborhood area because they had to shuffle to another home. I would like to end this presentation today with these 3 slides, please. I'd like you to note the League of Women Voters website. This is kept current by Chris Fruman, one of our members, and it is, I'm saying it, the League of Women Voters, MV.org. Please go online and you will see this will keep you up to date, our activities. It'll provide steps for how to register to vote if you haven't done so. And we will be putting up information about how to acquire absentee ballots. Please go on the website, do it frequently, and you will know what we're doing. Second, this, we're very proud to say, is our logo. Inside, you will see a banner, which is our suffrage colors for women's right to vote. But surrounding the words vote in the center of the circle are 3 ways we strive to engage, empower, and educate voters here on Martha's Vineyard. And we really hope this program is doing exactly that for you today. Third. Thank you, Alan. The third photo is a picture of a few of our members attending Lady Fest in Oak Bluffs this year. And you can see by the smiles on our faces that we do have fun together doing the work that meets our purpose. Rock on, League of Women Voters, Martha's Vineyard. Thank you. And now I would like to continue to introduce my husband, Alan. I'm going to share the bio that he has given me, but having lived with him for over 50 years, I could add a few comments, but I won't. I'll just read what he's shared with me. Alan was an emeritus professor of Earth and Environment at Boston University. He received his doctorate at Johns Hopkins University in biogeography and ecology in 1969. His research concerned using images and data from orbiting NASA satellites to map the global changes in land cover over the past 50 years that have occurred through human use and climate change. He was a pioneer along with his colleagues in this endeavor. Since retirement, he's become an active part in climate adaptation and mitigation planning on the island. He has led the Edgartown Energy Committee since 2019, focusing on the town's application to become a green community, which is part of a statewide program to provide funding for municipal energy conservation and reduction. He's a member of the Martha's Vineyard Commission Climate Action Task Force, which you may have been hearing about, which has been guiding the forward path for this adaptation to our changing island climate and to mitigation of climate risk by reducing the island's carbon emissions. Under this committee, also working with a group of energy modelers, who are predicting island energy consumption out to 2040 under various scenarios of economic response to climate imperatives. He meets regularly with the Vineyard Sustainable Energy Committee, which focuses on islands' coming transformation from fossil fuels to renewable electric power. Again, Lorna mentioned that, clean air. During his 45-year academic career, he has taught many aspects of environmental change and its impacts, and is prepared to talk today on how climate change affects human health and well-being, with a focus on Martha's Vineyard. Take it away, my love.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sorry, am I muted?
No, you're speaking well.
I'm
Thank
speaking
you.
well, fabulous. All right, thank you so much. Today, I'd like to take some time to talk about climate change and health and celebrate our island environment. Let me just move ahead here. So the first thing I'd like to say is, ask about is, how does climate change impact global health? Well, climate change affects social and environmental determinants of health, as we know. According to the World Health Organization, clean air, safe drinking water, sufficient food, secure shelter, these are all things that are affected by our environment and by climate change. If we look at what the predicted global effects are going to be, we have 250,000 additional deaths per year from 2030 to 2050 globally, from things like malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, heat stress. And in fact, direct damage costs to health, $2 to $4 billion per year, beginning in 2030. And not only that, it will affect areas with weak health infrastructure most. So what are the effects of climate change on health? Well, a few of them are here. I'd just like to go through them for a moment or two. First is more frequent and severe heat waves. And that is bringing on, of course, more heat-related illnesses and deaths. Second, we have shifting geographic areas of disease-carrying insects. Now, as climate changes, these disease vectors are going to be moving around, mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, and so on, and transmitting things like West Nile virus, dengue fever, Lyme disease, malaria, and lots of others. Secondly, thirdly, our climate is also going to increase plant growing seasons by giving us a bit longer time for plants to grow, and it'll also produce more frequent and severe storms. And so this has the health effect of increasing exposure to pollen and mold spores. Increasing wildfire intensity and frequency. Well, we've seen that already, particularly in the West over the last few summers. And of course, that affects lung diseases and asthma from the smoke itself. And then increasing temperatures can also cause poor air quality, generating ozone and smog, and that indeed can also increase and worsen heart and cardiovascular disease. Flooding contaminates water with bacteria, viruses, and chemicals, and of course that will increase foodborne and waterborne illnesses. And we've had lots of flooding, we've seen that. And more frequent and severe weather events will obviously cause more injuries, deaths, and illnesses when they happen. And also mental health stress for loss of property, of loved ones, displacement, and chronic stress. And lastly, these extreme events are going to stress hospital and public health care systems. This is a slide that I got from the CDC that kind of recaps these. And if we look at it, in the middle here, we have the climate change causes here, rising temperatures, more extreme weather, sea level rising, CO2 increasing. And as we look at these effects here, we see these heat-related illnesses and death, cardiovascular failure from extreme heat. We see injuries, fatalities, mental health impacts from severe weather. We see asthma, cardiovascular disease from air pollution. We see these changes in vector ecology I mentioned before, creating or spreading these diseases over here. We see increasing allergens providing respiratory allergies and asthma. We see water quality impacts with these unhealthy things down here. And we also see impacts on water and food supply with affecting malnutrition and diarrheal disease. Lastly, the whole environmental degradation may bring forced migration, civil conflict, and obviously mental health impacts. So how does climate change affect health equity? Well, we know that when climate change happens, disadvantaged communities are going to bear the brunt. They're going to see more of things like extreme heat, poor air quality, flooding, extreme weather events, and those vector-borne diseases I've just talked about. And there are populations within them that are more likely to suffer ill effects from climate change. And we can break these out: populations with low income, some communities of color, immigrant groups, particularly those who don't speak the non-dominant language, in our case, non-English speakers, indigenous peoples, children and pregnant women, older adults, and there are also vulnerable occupational groups that are likely to suffer. Persons with disabilities are exposed as well, and persons with pre-existing and chronic medical conditions. So these are the subpopulations that we have to worry about most with climate change. Here's another graphic that may be of interest. This is again from the CDC about populations at risk. And for over here, for example, we see communities of color where in fact they may be exposed to manufacturing and air pollution from that. We may see them exposed to transportation corridors and air pollution from that. Also generally urban living and its stresses as well. But we can somehow mitigate these things. We can develop adaptation plans that consider these communities and help improve their access to health care. Another population at risk, obviously, older adults, vulnerable to extreme events and particularly power outages and requiring evacuation. And one thing we can do on that is to check on our elderly neighbors, and we can also set up proper emergency communication to save lives. Low-income communities, this is another population at risk, and we find they're at risk of physical and mental illnesses, particularly during flooding and crowded shelter situations. And again, by disaster management, we can improve the resiliency as well, so that's something we can do in advance. Children, our last group, they have higher risk of heat, stroke, and illness than adults, and of course, we can monitor their exertion and hydration and control it. Okay, I'd like to just take us down now to the level of Martha's Vineyard and think about health and climate change here on our island. First of all, our island environment is actually pretty good. We have clean air, we have clean water, we have no industry, we have growing forests, we have well-tended agriculture. Our climate itself is moderated by the ocean against heat and cold extremes. Rarely are we as hot as the mainland and in the summer, and rarely are we as cold in the winter, which is a good thing when you live here. Also in our region, thunderstorms and tornadoes are rare, so we don't have to worry too much about those events. We have a lot of healthy food from our local agriculture and aquaculture and our fisheries. But there are threats. Our island is more susceptible to severe ocean storms with winds and flooding. Our forests here on the island are fire prone because they have abundant ground fuels. And groundwater is always an issue. We have what is called a sole source aquifer, which means that the island is a giant sand pile, and what goes into the sand pile on one end can move around and go to the other end just as well, which leads to nitrogen issues we have in our ponds and other things, and concerns for septic systems and wastewater treatment issues. Well, what are our specific island health risks from climate change? It turns out that the Mass Department of Public Health has developed a program where it does community profiles for every community in Massachusetts and tracks their health, particularly in the context of climate change, and produces a report. So I'd like to take you through a few observations from this report for the town of Oak Bluffs. First is about demographics, and you'll see here some diagrams over here, some circle charts, and over here in this orange tone, you'll see quoting from the report that older adults, for example, people with disabilities and children, have difficulty with extreme heat and cold. And they're also more likely to experience adverse health events if they have mobility challenges and pre-existing health conditions. So if we look over here to the charts, we see that we have 23% are 65 or over, 27% are 0 to 19. So we have almost as many seniors as we do have kids in that town. And our disabled population is as much as 9% as well. So there are some risks there. More demographics, income and poverty. Well, if your income is low, you lack resources and access to services, and you may be less able to protect yourself during extreme weather events. And if we look at income distribution, we see that 30% of Oak Bluffs has a household income less than $40,000, and households below the poverty line amount to 10%. So there's some significant challenges there. More demographics, race and ethnicity, and various forms of discrimination and racism have created long-standing health inequities for people of color, as of course we know. And we see over here that the race breakdown for Oak Bluffs, we have 5% identifying as Black, 6% as other, and ethnicity, we see 2% identifying as Hispanic in origin. So there are risks there. And environmental justice. One of the things this report does is to give a report on environmental justice for each community. And what it does is to look at subgroups, neighborhoods, and decide whether or not they meet certain environmental justice criteria. And then it adds up all the subgroups, compares them to the whole. And so it comes up with this environmental justice rating that we see here. And Oak Bluffs is 28% of our of the communities there in that town are of an EJ nature, and statewide it's 20%. So there are some exposures there as well. What about our present health? Well, Oak Bluffs is a place where we have more heart attacks maybe than others. Climate change is increasing the number of very hot days, and hot days increase the risk of hospital visits for people with chronic conditions. And as you can see over here from this chart, we have data on heart attack hospitalizations, no data for male and female. I guess our hospital doesn't keep those records, but over here we see that our adjusted rate of heart attacks in Oak Bluffs is 35.2 per 10,000 people, whereas the state average is 28.4. And of course, this may be due to the higher population of older folks in Oak Bluffs. Asthma, this is something of concern. And actually, we're doing pretty well. But asthma, of course, increases numbers of very hot days, or climate change increases the number of very hot days, and may increase ozone and pollen levels, trigger asthma. And looking over here at emergency department visits, we see that we have an average of 40.9 per 10,000 people in Oak Bluffs, whereas the statewide average is 58.2. So we're doing better, and I think that's because of our clean air and environment. And pediatric asthma prevalence in K through 8 students, these statistics are available. Now we do have some values for male and female students, but just looking at the total, it's 7.8 per 100 K through 8 students as opposed to 12.2. So we're doing pretty well here as well. Now, what about the climate change we're going to expect in the future? This report also gives some information about what to expect according to some climate models that they think are useful. And if we can look at heat and extreme rainfall, more days of extreme heat will increase the number of residents at risk for heat stress. Heavy precipitation events are expected to increase, leading to flooding. But if we look over here at these graphs, we see, well, the risks are not all that great for us. This black line here is the average of the last few years. So that's what we're doing now. And if we go from 2030 up here to 2080, we see the prediction here comes along this line, and it changes us from about 2 to maybe 10 days per year by 2080, above 90. But there is a wide variance. And in fact, we might have some years that would have a lot more. If we look at projected number of days with rainfall over 1 inch, flooding events, again, the black line is our average so far. And we see these models start us out a little bit lower here in 2030. but we increase up to here and wind up to be just about the same. And if we look at the numbers, they're pretty small. So the days of rainfall here may increase from 5 to 6.2. So not a big impact here, but again, there is room for variation in the models. Another thing we have to consider is the population over 65 living alone. And these older adults are obviously more vulnerable to health impacts during extreme heat events and other things. And if we look at the population in Oak Bluffs over 65, we find that it's 8%, whereas the statewide is 4.6%. So there are some challenges there for the town. Okay, a conclusion on this. Demographic risks. We have older population with significant proportion of seniors and disabled folks. We have significant low income and poverty proportions. We have race reported at 5% Black, 6% other. We have environmental justice population of 28% as opposed to 24. More than 8% of folks living at over 65 living alone. We have more heart attacks, less asthma. Climate change may change a bit, but not a lot, more particularly in terms of health events, heat events rather. And so our conclusion is that the town of Oak Bluffs has a significant exposure to daily health events of climate change, but our moderate island income will protect its population from weather extremes of heat and rainfall. So this is the kind of thing we can learn about public health of towns like Oak Bluffs, and indeed any town in the Commonwealth. So how can we protect against climate change? What are some of the ways in which public health folks will mediate the issues involved? So for heat-related illnesses, for example, real-time data and surveillance and public warnings are really quite important, keeping the public informed. Publication and information in advance. What do you do when this happens? A heat alert system and notifying people that something's coming. Access to cooled spaces, making sure that there's shelters available, and promoting hydration, letting people know that they do need to drink plenty of water in these situations. Injuries due to flooding, well, floodplain management, evacuation routes and centers, education to stay out of floodwaters. They can drown you very quickly. Another are the algal blooms that we have, biological controls, and so on. Flooding and molding, these are some things we can do to mitigate that. Mental health and heat, particularly, I'd like to note warnings and heat surveillance important, and suicide prevention. Turns out that a lot of heat events are involved with suicide, so that's something important to plan and think about. Urban design is important. That is to say, try keeping things cool by having environmental changes. And then just as an example of vectors, mosquito-borne disease and all of that. These are just a few examples in the way that public health folks can act to combat health changes due to climate change. So some final thoughts here. Global and regional effects. Our climate change will present varied and increasing threats to public and private health at all levels and in all regions. We're not going to escape this. Many vulnerable populations will suffer ill effects, and actions to anticipate and mitigate those climate change effects are going to be needed. Local effects here, while Martha's Vineyard is susceptible to rare and extreme weather events, our island climate is moderated by the ocean and distance from urban and industrial development. We enjoy clean air and waters and a healthy environment, as well as an island community that's dedicated to working together to solve problems and help one another. And that is truly a reason to celebrate. Thank you for your kind attention.
I thank both Kristi and also Alan for those great presentations. And I have just a quick question to ask Alan. Thank you so much for both of the presentations. They were well delivered and very, very informative. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, recently announced, in fact, they've been working on this, they're moving from their present location to a remote island in Indonesia because of climate change, and that particular island is sinking. Is there any concern with Martha's Vineyard from a climate change perspective that something drastic like that would impact the vineyard?
Well, from the point of view of sinking, we don't have that problem here. We're on quite a stable sand pile that is sitting, it's pretty thick, thousands of feet, and below it is bedrock. I think sinking is happening where you have a lot of organic deposits and they are slowly oxidizing and so shrinking themselves down. In our case, our sea level rise is coming to us, and it's coming more rapidly than in other areas of the country, and in fact, in other areas of the world. So that will affect our shores, but it won't affect the height of our island, particularly just its edges. And as that happens, of course, we'll see erosion and shrinkage of the island itself.
Interesting. So, wow. So that's going to be a couple of 100 or 1,000 years from now, or anything we have to worry about in our lifetime?
Well, certainly, yes. The sea level itself is changing slowly right now, but it will be changing much more rapidly over the next decades. And there is even, uncertainty grows. And it's possible that with certain events, for example, Arctic ice sheets are becoming unglued and beginning to slip into the water. And when they go into the water, they will raise the sea level, and that may take dozens of years for ice movements of this nature to come, but dozens of years of sea level rise that's significant, which means we don't have much time to prepare for it. So there are some risks out there that could flood our island and indeed our area of the country, indeed the whole world, in very significant ways.
Thank you much for that answer, for the resources that you have provided us. Again, your wife as well, Kristi, for the League of Women's Voters. Again, thank you so much for Kristi and Alan Strahler. Really appreciate the knowledge, the information, this Black History program. Thank you. All right. We're now going to move on to representing the Martha's Vineyard Museum, Heather Seger. Heather, take it away.
Thank you, Carole, and thank you, Kristi and Alan, for your presentation. So what role do museums play in our theme of Black health and wellness? In a recently retweeted 2015 essay about Black History Month and Dr. Woodson, Secretary of the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch, reminds us how important it is for museums to share family photographs, documents, and objects of African-American people as, quote, "there's no more powerful force than a people steeped in their history. And there's no higher cause than honoring our struggle and ancestors by remembering," end quote. He's talking about representation. And museums are key to a community's health because knowing our past allows us to learn from it and to shape a better future. For too long, museums have amplified voices of power and privilege, thereby legitimizing certain cultures and ignoring or silencing others. This lack of representation leads to a kind of community sickness. Isabel Wilkerson talks about this so eloquently in her book, Caste. She says, we're all worse off when privilege determines who can shine and thrive. And for museums, this means telling the untold stories, digging deeper to bring the voices of the voiceless into the narrative, bearing witness to the overlooked, and challenging the myths that have given aid and comfort to injustice. It's beginning to change, but there's still a great deal of work to do. In our own museum, we're working hard to share the history of all people on the island and make up for years where we were too myopic. We're committed at every level to making sure that we fully reflect our entire community in our collection, in our exhibits, in our curriculum, in our programs, in our visitorship, in the vendors that we work with, and the board members we recruit, and of course, in the employees we hire. We want every child walking through the museum, holding their grandmother's hand, to see themselves reflected in the stories we tell. And to that end, we want to encourage people to reach out to the museum to talk about sharing your family photographs, your books and letters, your treasured family heirlooms that are related to the vineyard. The more that we have in our collection, the more complete a story we can tell about our island. One area of the museum's work where diversity and inclusion have always been important is our oral history collection, curated by Lindsay Lee. For over 30 years, Lindsay's been interviewing vineyarders across every spectrum. The excerpt from an oral history that I'm going to share with you today is perfect for the theme of Black health and wellness. It features Caroline Hunter talking about the polar bears of Martha's Vineyard. The polar bears, started in the mid-1940s, are a diverse group who come together on the beach in Oak Bluffs every morning at 7:30 from July 4th to Labor Day to move together in the water. They come to relax, to reflect, to renew, and to have fun. For the polar bears, health and wellness is not just physical, but also social and spiritual as well. As you'll hear Caroline say, it is fellowship that holds the polar bears together. And at the Martha's Vineyard Museum, we both want to represent these forms of fellowship, these stories of the island, but we also want to learn from them as we learn how to be more representative as a gathering place and a place of fellowship for our entire community. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Well, I joined, I'd say about 86, 87 maybe. And so I've been a member ever since. And when I joined, their seniors were leading the exercise group. I've always been impressed with the fact that these are older women who are mobile and whose skin looks good and who have this quality of life and grace and strength. So I said, there's got to be something important to this. And so I joined. And at some point, as the older ones could not anymore, Eleanor Hughes and I took over the exercise group and determined that we needed to have it every day. Back then, it was a ritual of a routine of exercises. So if you went on a regular basis, you'd get the rhythm of what was going on. Arms, legs, whole body exercises. And then as people would go off island in the winter and go to water aerobics classes or exercise classes, they'd bring back new techniques and incorporate it. When we joined, they would sing Wade in the Water to walk in. And we would do the Jacob's Ladder song. That's one of our upper arm exercises. We since embellished Jacob's Ladder to add maybe 4 verses to it. So those were some of the older rituals. And then Ellen and I added the secret sacred ceremony. And then Eleanor added our mantra, I am the source of my joy and infinite possibilities. So we have some of those traditions that we still honor and still do. The exercise is physical. We often have young people who come in and they think, oh my God, these old ladies, it's not going to be anything too much, and we wear them out. So it's a full exercise. We do some cross-body training. We do cardio. And then sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's social, sometimes it's spiritual, sometimes it's religious, sometimes people bring their troubles to us and leave them with us. And we pray that people treat each other on land the way we treat each other in the water. And after we do our ritual, then we ask people to introduce themselves, say where they're from, and say a word of the day. Yesterday, we were in for a long time. I have 54 people. And so instead of having each person do their 3 things, I just had people say where you're from, and then we went around and said the word of the day. So we will restructure the class depending on what's going on. Sometimes we'll have rough water, and if we have a lot of people that we don't know, and we don't know whether they can swim or not, if it gets too dangerous, we get out. And now one thing is full disclosure, I cannot swim. I can tread water. But that feature helps a lot of people get in the water. Because when they say to me, I can't swim, I say, well, I can't swim either. I'm embarrassed that I can't swim, and I think everybody should swim. I can say, okay, well, just come this far with me, and if you don't like it, you'll go out. And at the end of the exercise, you get the spiritual, overwhelming joy of a person saying, I was able to do it. I'm either going to go home and take lessons, or I won't be so afraid. We've had people with serious health conditions who have come back and thanked us. We met a woman last night coming out of the theater, and she said, weren't you all in the water today? I said, oh, yeah. She said, oh, thank you so much. I said, oh, it's just a simple welcoming. She said, no, it is not a simple welcoming. She said, it made my day. It changed my whole experience of coming to the Vineyard. So we have tons of those stories of people telling us how important the experience was. So that's what we offer, and it's good for us, and it's good for our people. Now, last year we produced our first ever concert, brought in a band from Cape Verde. It was a wild success. We gave everybody in the park Mardi Gras beads, and we had an intergenerational dance party. This year they had it again, and we have another one September 1st. So we've gotten into polar bear events, but these are give back events using some of our dues money to benefit the larger community and thanking the community for supporting us.
What do you love most about the polar bears?
The fellowship. There are not many other places you go where you're known. The group is very eclectic. On any given day, you're going to have an islander, somebody who works every day, somebody who's just here on vacation, somebody who lives here. We're not taking attendance, but when you come back, we're like, wow, Lindsay, you're back. Missed you. So yeah, the fellowship. That's the glue that holds us together. That's the glue that we want to spread to the next generation and hopefully have some people coming behind us who will honor the traditions of the morning announcement, of the breakfast, of the welcoming, of the fellowship.
Wow, I want to join. That seems like big fun. Heather, you're on mute.
Well, Carole, next time you visit the vineyard, and if it's summertime, 7:30 a.m. every morning, they're down there.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Heather Seger, and thank you for the very informative information about our collecting information from families, Black and brown families, so that the legacy can be continued and certainly shared with organizations and institutions like yours. That was really, really well done. Thank you so much. All right, great. We're now going to move on, and our next presentation will come from the director of the Oak Bluff Library, Allyson Malik. Allyson, take it away.
Hi, it's still morning. Good morning, everybody. Hi there. My name is Allyson Malik. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you to everyone who arranged for this event, and I've been inspired and just really thankful for being here to soak in all of the information that has preceded me. It's always difficult to go last at this event, but here we are. And thank you to everyone who has joined us for the full 2 hours. At whatever time you want, you can go ahead and play that video, Carole. With the pandemic roller coaster that's been going on, I know it's been hard to get anywhere. And if you're here in town, you may not have come by the library recently. So I put together a little walking tour so that you can kind of see what is going on inside the library these days. We are open year-round to both residents and visitors. And since so much has happened over the last year, I was checking my notes from this time last year when we last met for this event, and we were not even open to the public at that point. We were still doing contactless hold pickup. But as you can see from the video, we're very much open, and looking forward to seeing everyone come back into the building the next time you have a chance. So today's theme is on health and wellness, and as you can see here right in front, so we're going to pan back in a second, that the library is actually part of an Oak Bluffs town-wide initiative to get free COVID tests to our town residents. You just simply show up, you tell us how many are in your household, and that's how many boxes you get, and that's all the questions we ask. It's important to stay on top of this pandemic, and so we are doing our part. Here we move up the stairs, I'll just take a moment to say that I want to extend my thanks to Mary Araujo and Dr. Lorna Andrade, and of course to Carole Copeland Thomas for arranging this event with us today, and hand sanitizing stations on both sides of the doorway. So going up the stairs, I'll orient us to the library building. Downstairs has our main fiction, nonfiction, audiovisual materials. Upstairs, you can see we have our children's room. We also have special collections. We'll get to those in a moment. The children's room, I call the crown jewel. It's Mary Jane, hello. The crown jewel of our library. It's a warm, inviting space, and it really creates an incredible experience for children and families. The couple of displays we have out right now include this Black History Month display for our younger patrons, and of course has the more important parts of our nation's past, including Black history. I mean, so even though these are children's books, just want to point out that we make sure our collection does not sugarcoat the past. Children in the past had to live those lives in those times, and we believe it's important for children today to learn about them. This is Nina Montanil, our head of adult and technology librarian. Behind the reference desk, you can see we actually have health and wellness and medical resources, including the physician's desk reference, McGill's medical guide, the Gale Encyclopedia to Alternative Medicine, Gray's Anatomy, and of course, the special collection area continues with our Martha's Vineyard collection. I will say that for medical resources, it's, the library's resources are vetted and published by reputable and authoritative sources. I know that it's, when you have medical conditions, so easy to go online and do your own research, but I mean, some of the stuff you find online is dubious at best and maybe intentionally misleading at worst. So you can come to this library or any library to start your medical research and know that what you're getting is good information. What you were seeing there is highlighting a couple of other special collections that we have for people who are seeking US citizenship or learning English. very important parts of our collection. And now we move towards our African American collection. You can see a couple of Cutie Bowls paintings hanging right above. Our African American collection was started in 2016 when Robert C. Hayden, who we've discussed many times before and is worthy to continue his legacy here in the library, he donated his collection of scholarly materials to us back in 2016, and with Nina Montanil's help, we curated it. We continued to add to the collection. We created these finding aids that you're seeing on the screen now, so that if you have questions about how you can, what resources to go to if you are particularly interested in a certain segment of culture and history, these will tell you what part of this collection is going to be relevant to your research. You can go online to our special collection part of our website and take a look at those finding guides and to learn more about the history of this collection. And once again, I just want to say the library and our community is indebted to Robert Hayden for his donation of those materials. And he is the one who really helped us get that entire collection started. So I just wanted to say that we will always have part of his legacy here with our library. And I will keep this short. So I will just say that on behalf of the Oak Bluffs Library, just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. I have pasted our contact information in the general chat for those of us who have any questions about library resources or how to access this information, or just have general questions about the town. We're excited to hear and preserve your stories. And until we can see you again, just want to say stay safe and healthy.
That was fantastic. You know, I felt virtually, I know it was a virtual tour, but I love the way that you covered the entire library and visually giving us a representation of, you know, how it's structured and what's there. And certainly the legacy of Bob Hayden is there. Thank you so much, Allyson, Malik. Really appreciate you and what you've done. Now we're going to open it up for the remaining few minutes to Q&A. Marie Doubleday, take yourself off put your camera on, take yourself off mute, and Allyson, leave everything in place, and let's answer some of the questions that have come forth. And I will stop sharing the screen and let you take it away.
Okay. Right now I'm seeing 3 questions, and folks, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A. The first question is from Deborah Harris, and it says, will there be a continuing relationship between Martha's Vineyard and the UK on matter of racism and discrimination?
I will answer that question first, and then please others jump in. The clip that you saw with Michael Curry, let me just go on and spotlight myself. The clip that you saw with Michael Curry came from the US-UK Summit on Race. That's a collaborative effort that I started back in 2021. This was our 3rd event. We just had an event yesterday, our 4th event celebrating Black History Month here in the US. And so that endeavor is going to dig deeper and continue on, because there are many, many issues of racial discrimination, unconscious bias, and the like that go on in the UK that we're totally not even aware of. And I say that because when George Floyd was tragically killed, as you know, there was a worldwide eruption all over the world, different countries who understood and they identified with what had happened, including the UK. There were statues that were removed, victoriously so, representing the colonial past of the UK. And so our collaboration will continue. And I'm sure, because of our now connection with Martha's Vineyard and various constituents, that will continue from that point of view. But I'll step back and have any of our other panelists and speakers to answer. Okay, thank you. Marie,
All
question
right.
2.
So question number 2 is from a Miss Paula Paris. And I can't help noticing that Bob Hayden's middle name is Carter. Was that in order of Dr. Woodson? May they both rest in eternal peace. Is there any member of Mr. Hayden's family here.
And perhaps you can put your answer, put that response in the chat, and we'll take a quick look at it. Dr. Hart, Thelma Hart Johnson, I'm not sure if you can answer that question. You can come on camera and have a response and let us know if that is something that is connected.
Would you believe that I didn't realize that his name was Carter until I read the obituary and I finally saw Carter? I've only known Robert C. That's all he ever wrote. So I do not know. I thought it might be, but I do not know.
Okay. That sounds like some Oak Bluff Public Library and Martha's Vineyard Museum research.
So his daughter, Karen McAdams, is on the program with us, and she put in the chat that Carter is a family name.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. So we have, I think there's only one more question. No, maybe not. Okay, I'm going down. So this is from a Miss Lee Smith, and hold on. I've just read an interesting book called Where the Bus Stops by George Allen, a Black lawyer. Have you heard of him? He is in Florida and has traveled widely.
Allyson, perhaps? No.
Sadly, no. So as a librarian, I say that I'm very good at looking up information, not necessarily just knowing it like immediately. But I did note it, and I have it in my notes to do some research on this after this program is over.
Okay. The next question I actually might be able to answer. Lee Smith asked, "What is environmental justice?" So I'll pass it on to Mr. Strahler, but within the NAACP, a few years ago, they began another committee called Environmental Justice. And we have, with our branch here, we have recently, within the past few months, lifted off that committee under the chairmanship of Mr. Joel Weintraub. And he has done a phenomenal job. But I think perhaps they're looking for more of a definition of environmental justice. So I'll put that out to the panelists.
Alan, any response, or anyone else who can answer the question? Well, Marie, I think you've covered that sufficiently. And we've answered all the other questions. I want to thank you, Marie.
One more question, though.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, this is from Jane Flanders. I don't have a question, but I have something I'd like to say about the presentation. May I? I don't know. I can read it, or unless Jane Flanders would like to speak.
I think you're going to have to read it.
Okay. I'm interested in spaces that afford opportunity for honest conversation about racism between people that allows for us to take a look at our internalized socialization. When I am in a space where many people come together on the issues of racism and other social issues, when someone expresses their story, I've learned to listen and hold a place for that voice. When another experience contradicts that, I feel feelings of not being able to be honest. When someone addressed the issues of how Black citizens have been feeling about being touched. And then it goes on, not a question, but George Allen was a good friend of Dr. Thelma Johnson, and she can make the connection. George passed away last year, and I don't know, there's a couple more it's going on. When someone contradicted that, and as nurses, we didn't do that. Jane Flanders again, I feel that sometimes stops all videos. And then there's an anonymous attendee. In social work, I recognize that people experience things. So I don't know if there's any response to what I just said from the panelists.
Anyone?
This
Yes.
is Heather from the museum, and I'd encourage.
I'm sorry, I just muted you by mistake.
That's okay.
Okay.
I just encourage people to take a look at A Long Talk. Martha's Vineyard is a community of change, one of the communities of change that A Long Talk has chosen. And it's a 3-day course that people can go on in community with other people from Martha's Vineyard and from other places around the country that really addresses how we talk about racism. It provides a lot of educational resources. It's well worth checking out if you haven't done so yet.
Well, we are out of time. I know this could go on and on, but we want to be respectful of time. And I just want to say, on behalf of the entire team of experts, I'd love for you to remove put yourself back on camera. We'd like to acknowledge everyone and say thank you all so very much. And I know that there are going to be closing comments by Dr. Thelma Johnson and I believe Marie Araujo, and I'm going to highlight everyone, add you all to the spotlight, and just say thank you very much for all that you have done, for the work that has gone into this wonderful program, the resources. Please, you can save the chat. You can definitely save the chat and carry it with you. And then perhaps you can let us know, either Allyson or Heather, let us know. We've actually recorded this and it will be housed. Let us know where that's going to be housed. But I'm going to ask perhaps Dr. Thelma Johnson, Hart Johnson, to give her closing remarks, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
I again thank everyone for joining us today. And we started out with Kristi talking about The Journey Across Water by Hannah Jones. And the words near the end of the book say this, and when we think of this, we think we're celebrating African American history. And it says, and it's called Point Comfort. Finally, the ship stopped moving and the people were dragged to the deck. They closed their eyes against the light of sun they had not seen since Mother Africa's coast. They closed their eyes against the sight of a land that was not theirs. And this is how our story starts in America. And we continue today to fight for the just position of African Americans in history. We don't want to be add-ins, or we don't want to be thought less than. We just want a fair, truthful statement of the presence of African Americans in our country, who are not all perfect, who don't do all things well, but we are citizens of these United States. And we want to remember what I said in the beginning, to love one another as we love ourselves. That's the only way we are going to be a united country.
Dr. Thelma Hart Johnson, thank you so much. Dr. Alan Strahler, Kristi Strahler, any closing comments?
Well, I would just say that it's been great to be a part of this celebration, and I've learned a lot, and I hope you folks have learned a little bit too. I'm really glad to be here and to have joined this group. It's been a wonderful experience for me.
Thank you, Kristi.
Yes, and I would just say that I felt a spiritual connection as well to all the information, and onward towards the goal of equality. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Marie Araujo, closing comments.
I just want to, on behalf of Dr. Lorna and myself, and I have to say that Dr. Lorna had to leave to go attend a virtual funeral for her, a dear uncle of hers. But we just want to thank everybody for attending. We hope everybody enjoyed it, and we hope that everybody stays safe, healthy, and has some wellness, and have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Awesome. Thank you much. Thank you. Heather Seger.
I said this in the chat, I'll say it again. The museum is open. We'd love to see people coming in to check out some of the exhibits that are there. And Carole, thank you again for pulling us together and keeping us organized. And Thelma and Dr. Lorna as well. This has been great fun to be a part of and really informative. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Allyson, Malik. And Allyson, can you give us a sense of where the recording will be found after this event ends?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just going to load this to the Oak Bluffs Public Library's YouTube channel. So from there, it's going to be publicly accessible. And I can send the link out to this whole group and post it on social media so that anyone who's looking for it has an easy time finding it.
Great, great. Thank you very much. And closing out our discussion today, and I want all of our panelists and speakers to stay put while our guests leave, but the president of the Martha's Vineyard branch of the NAACP, Arthur Doubleday. Oh, but before you start, your mom, Marie Doubleday, also with the NAACP. Marie, take it away first. Oh, you're on mute.
Just that I appreciate the efforts of everyone here in this annual collaboration. I think it's very useful to our community and beyond. And I'm beginning to enjoy doing the tech stuff. So be well.
Doing a great job too. Thank you. All right. And now Arthur Doubleday.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Copeland, thank you for all the work that you did on this. Dr. Lorna, the stray hairs, Heather from the museum, Oak Bluffs Library. Great event. Wow, we spanned a lot of topics, and I had no idea prior to this. I had some ideas, but I didn't realize how much Mr. Hayden had done locally in Oak Bluffs. I know what he did in Boston, but I was not aware of him donating his papers to the Oak Bluffs Library, and that just seems like that's completely within his character, giving his life work. So this was a really good conversation to have on a Saturday morning, the first Saturday in February. Having been on, this will be my third Zoom webinar in the last 40 days. I think this one went the smoothest. So congratulations, Carole. That was great. And that's it. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Attorney Arthur Doubleday. I appreciate those comments too. And I learned an awful lot. I was taking notes again. And I read this obscure article a couple of days ago in the Boston Globe about Jakarta moving their location, and bam, here I can ask Dr. Alan Strahler about Martha's Vineyard if they're going to suffer the same consequences. So again, you never know where you're reading. Your knowledge will take you when you're at an event like this event. Thank you all so much. We've enjoyed being with you. Thank you for staying. The crowd pretty much stayed through the end. I know there's going to be follow-up. Definitely check out the recording and share this recording with others. You know, Martha's Vineyard, you probably take it for granted, but this island is known by people all over the world. I will make sure to share this with my friends and colleagues in the UK because they're fascinated by the United Kingdom, by Martha's Vineyard and other places too. So make sure you get the recording and spread it with others, and certainly spread the love and spread the importance of Black history, because Black history really is American history. Thank you all so much. Take care. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.